Ready?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I just wanted to start by welcoming Muhi Khawaja, our main speaker today. And since most of us are from Cordoba House Sunday School, I don't need to give much of a background about the school itself, but I'll say a few words, Gati, for your benefit. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. So basically, our Sunday School is an Islamic weekend Quran and Islamic studies program for children and youth. And when we first started in 2015, we still are, and we were part of a larger organization that serves the Muslim community called Cordoba House. And as the years grew, what we found is that we had a lot of initial work and investment and capital and thoughts and labor that were put into starting the program, and we thought that like any startup, that the beginning would be the toughest part. But like most not-for-profits, what we discovered was that in order to sustain and grow the program, we were lacking in capacity, and we were depending more and more for funding on the few individuals that we were servicing in our community. And much of our funding came directly, particularly for the school program, from the parents. And they went directly into paying teachers, paying rent, and paying for books. But as most of us know, that in order to run an organization, we need admin help, we need operations, we need accounting, we need payroll, we need audit. And the question becomes, how are we going to sustain this, let alone grow our organization and fundraise? And in order for us to effectively fundraise, it means that the few of us who are mission-driven, program-oriented, spiritual/religious kind of people, and day-to-day we're invested in the spiritual contenting and the designing of programs or administering to our community, with very little expertise in fundraising, find ourselves extremely stretched with very little understanding of even how to fundraise, let alone time. And so I found that there are many people and many organizations in this very similar situation. So we've had quite a few meetings among parents to find ways among people that had a better understanding for this, as to how we can fundraise beyond tuition. And this had become, and it continues to be, our concern, because we do have to pay our administrators, we have to pay operation staff, we have to pay curriculum developers, we have salaries to pay, without which the programs won't run. And we find that it's increasingly difficult, particularly in a transient society like New York, to depend on parents to do that. And this is when Jahanara, who's with us, Iskandar's mother, who's a mom at Sunday School, who's had extensive experience with startups in impact investment and fundraising via grants. She had suggested that we go beyond just strategies for looking at parents and find out what the other instruments are out there to help us fundraise. And she recommended that we bring Muhi Khawaja today to help speak with us. Jahan, would you take it from there?
Sure, thank you, Naz. So I'd like to, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce Mohi. I've known Mohi for a long time. He is, part of family. Mohi has over a decade of experience in development and fundraising for several nonprofits, including University of Michigan, of which he's a graduate, Council for American Islamic Relations, the Michigan chapter, Islamic Scholarship Fund, and numerous others, and most recently, American Red Cross. And he took all that experience together to found American Muslim Community Foundation. And the goal and the mission of this organization is to kind of professionalize Muslim giving. And he's going to talk about what that means today. In addition, Mohi is also a certified fundraising executive and has a certificate in fundraising from Indiana University School of Philanthropy, where he's an adjunct faculty. Mohi lives in San Francisco with his wife, cat, and dog. That's his immediate family. So, okay, Mohi, take it from here.
Thank you so much, Jahan Babi, and really excited to be spending time with you this afternoon. I've had several conversations with Naz and have gotten to learn more about the Cordoba House and the Sunday School, and she's really committed to this mission and this nonprofit sector, and I'm just fortunate to have and be part of this conversation with you. So I do want to share a little bit, maybe just taking 10 minutes to talk about American Muslim Community Foundation, and then we'll jump into the how Cordoba House can take advantage of best practices in fundraising. So I'm going to share my screen and also request if you guys are on microphone to just go to mute, and then we will get rolling. So hopefully just give me confirmation that you can see the presentation. So it's loading now.
Yeah, we can see it. Also, go blue.
Excellent, of course, always go blue. So, you know, bismillah. So we'd like to start out with like the religious motivation of why we give, right? We know about zakat, we know about sadaqah, we know that it's mentioned in the Quran so much, and there's a poem that Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba wrote. He's from Senegal, and it was called the Masalik al-Jinan, the Pathways to Paradise. And he references in a segment an opportunity when somebody is on the Day of Judgment going to paradise. They're walking across a bridge, and along that bridge are things that happened in their life or things that they didn't do in their life. And the way to make it easier to cross that bridge, he refers to by giving charity. And the reason why he says that is because giving charity is an affirmation of our trust in our faith. It purifies our wealth, it protects us from calamity, it expiates our sins, and it actually brings joy to the people who receive it and even to those who give it. So we always like to start off from that mindset of reminding us why we like to give and why we do it. So what is a community foundation? American Muslim Community Foundation, or AMCF. We are a publicly supported nonprofit institution that's governed by a board which serves its donors and the nonprofit sector and the community overall. In New York, you have dozens of community foundations. And across the country, there are hundreds of community foundations. But we started the American Muslim Community Foundation because there was none representative of the Muslim community. So our vision is to lead sustainable and strategic Muslim philanthropy for today and future generations. We're looking to cultivate donor giving, diversify funding to advance charitable causes like the Cordoba House Sunday School. And our values are based on sacredness, strategic, sustainable, collaborative, diverse, and inclusive, all done with integrity initiatives. So to give you a little bit of background about our leadership, Safa Ibrahim, she is our co-founder and president. She's been on CARE National's board, several organizations in the San Francisco Bay Area over the last 20 years, brings a really strong nonprofit background to our organization. Agnes Chong is our vice president, and she's also our, she is also a PhD in nonprofits and has done extensive research on Muslim nonprofit organizations. Omar Hassan is on the East Coast. He lives in New Jersey, works in New York at a small investment firm called Cloverlay, and he serves as our chair of the investment committee as well. Ayman Al-Sawat is a New Jersey native and is in the IT security profession. And Michael Ramos Lynch is a lawyer and entrepreneur in Austin, Texas. On our advisory committee, I'm not going to go through everybody, but you may recognize some names of religious scholars or financial advisors, and we have people helping us with marketing, with fundraising, and you should be thinking about this as well for Cordoba House. Who are your go-to people outside of your board of directors that you can pinpoint for specific help on things? This advisory committee is really ad hoc. When we have an issue, we reach out to them and they're available. And then as you see all the way on the bottom, the staff is just me, lonely self here, working on all of this great work. And alhamdulillah, we have a very dedicated board that does so much. So kudos to you guys for being board members because it takes a lot of work. I'm going to skip through the videos and we'll share this slide deck with you so that you can actually go back and refer to all of this material. Like I said, there are hundreds of community foundations across the country, but in 2016, when we started and looked at the landscape, there were none for the Muslim community or by the Muslim community. So that's why we started. A little bit more about our journey specifically. Like I said, in 2016, our co-founders got together. We shared this vision of how we can impact the sector. We did a strategic plan in 2016, and we've been working off of that same plan and iterating every year from that framework. In 2017, we started with donor advised funds, which I'll talk a little bit about. And then 2018, we started offering endowments. In 2019, we started offering giving circles. And this year, we started doing grants to nonprofit organizations. So alhamdulillah, over the last few years, we've been able to give out $1.7 million to communities across the country. Our main services, donor advised funds and giving circles. This is what we do for families like yours. And you can open up a savings account that's meant for just charitable giving. And that is what is called a donor advised fund. A giving circle is when you and a group of family or friends come together and you pitch in money to a pool of funds, and then you nominate charities to distribute that money to. One really fun example is we have a family that plays fantasy football together. Each member contributes $500, and then at the end of the season, the winner gets to decide which charity to give that money to. So for nonprofit organizations like Cordoba House and the Sunday School, we offer services for helping you plan your endowment and also setting you up your project to receive charitable donations, and we'll do all of the accounting for you in terms of giving receipts to your donors, and that's called fiscal sponsorship. So those are things that we can talk about later as well in the case of you guys are interested in implementing those things. So some of our programs, some of the things that we do, we're launching a Muslim philanthropy podcast in the next month. We're going to be having a social impact accelerator where nonprofit leaders can come in and have a mentor and work through a project and do that later this year. We're starting a professional development fund because when nonprofits, they're able to hire staff, but maybe they don't get the benefits, right? They don't get a 401k, they don't have health insurance, they don't have even money to go and learn at a program or a conference. And those are the types of things that we're going to want to provide for the nonprofit Muslim community overall. We are doing webinars and consulting, just like today. We reach out to specific nonprofits and try to help them. We're introducing the Philanthropy Awards later this year, where we're going to nominate a business, a nonprofit, and an individual or family and honor them with this award. And then lastly, we have Muslim philanthropic values. So looking at what parts of our faith motivate our giving. And there are card set that and a discussion that you can work with your family to have those conversations, and it makes it a little bit easier about how you decide your zakat, who you give to, and all of those things. So more on that if you're interested. Again, back to the Quran, why are we so motivated to give? We have been told over and over in the Quran to be steadfast in our prayer and to practice regular charity. We know that this is a direct commandment from God for us to fulfill. Just a little bit of breakdown on the American Muslim community. Pew Research Group came out with these numbers in 2018, I believe. 34% of the Muslim community in America is South Asian, 26% are Arab, and 25% are Black, 9% are white or mixed, and 6% are Hispanic. The MPAC and a few other organizations, Engage, have come up with numbers on the registered Muslim voters in the United States, and the estimates up to 1.5 million, and that's obviously significant this year as it's an election cycle. The Dinar Standard is a boutique firm that does some research on the Muslim community as well. They've said that there are over 300 Muslim schools, like Cordoba House Sunday School, with over 40,000 students. And then if you look at GuideStar and other places like that, you can see that there are over 2,000 mosques in the United States, a majority of which have been built in the last decade. And then there are over 5,500 nonprofit organizations registered as Islamic. In the United States overall, there's 1 million nonprofit organizations. So you are not alone in this. There's so many organizations having these conversations about how they fundraise, especially during a pandemic. So I'm really glad that we are having this conversation today. Dinar Standard as well came up with the figure that American Muslims have $124 billion of disposable income. There are at least 3.75 million Muslims. That's a low-end conservative number. And Muslims are the second largest non-Christian group in over 20 states. Who would have thought that of all places in North Dakota, Muslims were the second largest religious group? And you know that America has a long-standing history of Islam, right? There are estimates of at least 1/3 of slaves that were brought over from Africa were Muslim. There are people like the freed African Umar ibn Said, who wrote in his autobiography in Arabic, and what people thought that he was a lunatic because they didn't understand Arabic, right? So there are strong examples, historically accurate, that showcase that Muslims have been here since the very beginning. And Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the first purpose-built mosque in the United States. And I can keep on going on. And we have great examples through the 60s with Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, and today with Congresswomen Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. So we need to be more strategic about how we use our influence and power, because yes, even though we are a marginalized community, we still have access to privilege here in the United States. So we need to be mindful of how we access that. And we can do that strategically through our charitable giving. In the United States, the general American population gave $427 billion in 2018. This research is done by Giving USA, which is connected with Indiana University, and they produce this report every single year. As you can see, individuals give a majority of money. Corporations only give 5%. Although that is very significant, $20 billion, it's not where we should be focusing our attention. We need to be building strong relationships with individuals, because individuals are the ones who give the most. If you look at that figure of bequests, that $35.7 billion, a bequest is somebody who leaves money in their will, in their estate plan, right? And even in Islam, we can leave 1/3 of our estate to charity. So we need to be having conversations with estate planning lawyers. And actually on Tuesday, April 21st, we are having a conversation on how to calculate zakat and everything like that. So if you're interested in that webinar, we will be having an estate planning lawyer as part of that conversation as well. So again, this all goes to show that individuals give the most amount of money every year. And where do they give it to? In the next graph, it says 29%, $124.5 billion goes to religious causes. 14%, $58.72 billion goes to education. What is Cordoba House Sunday School? It's a religious educational organization, right? You have potential of attracting the most giving from individuals right there. So what motivates donors? And this is like overall Americans. It's not just the Muslim community. So you need to be thinking about your mission. As an institution, what is Cordoba House doing? What is the motivation that you are calling to when you ask somebody to support? What is the end impact, right? It's that your kids have a better understanding of their faith. You know, we always talk about operations and we need help for operations, and that is important. But focus on your messaging to your donors. It's great to have those conversations with your board because that is the reality, but shift it when you talk to your donor base. Personal satisfaction. If you ever have helped somebody else, there is that gratifying experience. a lot of what motivates people's donation is their family and upbringing. And that's why we are creating those Muslim philanthropic values cards, so that you can have those conversations with your kids. That's why we set up donor advised funds for families, so that you can engage them in the decisions of how you distribute your zakat and sadaqah. And personal stories. Each of you have kids at the school. Talk from the heart when you see the impact and change in your kids and the teachers and how they motivate one another and the positive experiences that are happening. Put that into your marketing material that you will use to ask for your donations. And then, of course, we have our religious beliefs and motivators to donate. And each of us have a sphere of influence, people that we can reach out to and connect with and tell about the organizations that we support and love. And of course, lastly, there are tax benefits, but not everybody itemizes and not everybody takes advantage of that. But in a sense, it does motivate people a little bit to make their donations. The number one reason why people do not give is because they weren't asked. So never feel bashful about making that ask to your network. Yes, you can sound like a broken record, but it's coming from a good heart. And if you are able to tell that message successfully, it will get across with impact. People don't give because they also think that their gift doesn't matter, right? If you showcase that your organization has a $500,000 goal and somebody's thinking, well, what's my $10 going to do or $1,000 going to do? You need to make sure that you have a deliverable on what that dollar amount is going to do, how that's going to change your institution and make it stronger. And lastly, the reason why people do not give is because there's a lack of trust. So we need to make sure that anytime you are doing a fundraiser, anytime you are doing an appeal, there is full transparency. You know, as a community foundation, we list our 990 statements on our website prominently, and we make sure that everybody has access to that. We just exceeded $1 million for the first time in revenue in 2019. So we're going to be doing audited financial statements. All of those things are to build trust. And you, of course, you can have a profile on Charity Navigator and GuideStar and places like that, but you necessarily don't get rankings until you cross a certain threshold with them. So you have to keep that in mind, but as a nonprofit, you can still at least make a profile. And if you update your 990 records and stuff like that, you can get like a seal of approval from those organizations, and all of those things help with your credibility. So some of you are probably familiar with the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. They do research on the American Muslim community. It's actually where I got my career started back in 2010 as a development officer and fundraising strategy. And they did this research on Muslim philanthropy. You can find it on their website, and it breaks down why Muslims donate. They compare it with people from Christian and Jewish backgrounds as well. And that's what the second graph is on the bottom. So just generally taking a look, the majority of Muslims give because they feel like those with more should help those with less. Then comes their sense of religious duty and obligation. And then tied is giving makes me feel good, and giving can make change about desired impact. What's interesting in this research, they also stated that Muslims are just as likely to give to non-religious causes than they are to Islamic causes as well. They may vary the amount in which they give, but they are just as likely to support other causes. And I think that's important to showcase with American Muslim Community Foundation. When we support an organization like your alma mater or University of Michigan or the local food bank that doesn't have any religious identity to it, but you as an individual, if you were to give a check or make a donation, there's not necessarily an identity factor that you are doing that as a Muslim. But if you give and partner with American Muslim Community Foundation, it shows that you are directly giving as a Muslim in America for that cause. So it builds a sense of goodwill in the community as well. So back to the faith, why we give. There's a hadith that from Imam Nawawi that says Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reported that the Prophet of God, peace be upon him, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, every joint of a person must perform a charity each day that the sun rises. So we know that this is very important to our faith and motivates why we do what we do. So now we're getting into the meat of things. So thank you for bearing with me through all of that. What are things that Cordoba House or any nonprofit that you're affiliated with can do? The Sunday School, whether you're on another board, take this information, replicate it there. So at the very top level, your board needs to come up with a strategic plan. And the people that are in conversation to come up with that should be your staff members as well. Everybody needs to be on the same page when you're implementing this strategic plan. After you're done with the strategic plan, and that's a whole other webinar that we can get into, comes your development plan. Same thing. All the people that need to be in that conversation, your executive director, your development director, your board chair, your fundraising chair, all the important people, whether it's even admin at your organization, but they're the ones processing the gifts, right? Everybody that is involved with the fundraising aspect of your organization should be creating the development plan. And there's so many details that go into that development plan that, again, we can provide resources, but we can do a whole conversation just on making a development plan. And same thing with the marketing plan. You need to come up with a calendar of events with your touch points with your donor base, all of those things. And the best part is each of these plans need to communicate with one another. They need to have the same timelines. They need to have the same people of who is going to be the task manager and who's going to help identify coming to those goals. And the next time you have a board meeting, you need to look at where you are in the process of that and always go back to these plans. So at AMCF, when we have our board meetings, we dedicate a certain time to that. And we have a separate annual meeting outside of our board meetings that we just work on the strategic plan. What worked, what didn't, how can we adjust, what things do we need to introduce this year, all of those things. They're tough conversations. Time is always critical, but these are things that are going to set your organization apart from everybody else. So within fundraising, and in the industry, we call that development. So within development, how are you engaging your board members in creating their own spheres of influence, right? Every board member needs to be involved in fundraising. I'm going to say that again. Every board member needs to be involved in fundraising. You may not be the one that's asking, but you need to at least open your network up. And that is super critical to the longevity and health of your organization. As a board member, you may only be on that organization for 2 years, 1 year, 20 years. But the idea being that if you're not opening up your network to the organization, why are you on the board? I can say that. Naz may not be able to say that. Other people may not be able to say that. But I'm telling you, if you are on the board of a nonprofit organization, you need to be involved in fundraising. So again, within fundraising, you need to create a calendar of when are your touch points with your donors, right? We have Ramadan literally right around the corner. What's your plan to activate that? A lot of Americans give at the end of the year as well. What's your plan and touch points for that entire timeline? We have specific Islamic holidays which are beneficial for us to make donations on. What is your plan to engage your donors for those days? Everything has to have a timeline and a follow-up plan. The moment you hit send on an email, what's the expectation of what you're going to do when you receive a donation? You can't just rely on a simple email to motivate people to give. There has to be more meat to it. You have to back it up with phone calls. You have to back it up with sending out letters. You have to be very creative because, again, now we can't do face-to-face meetings, right? And how are you going to engage your donors for the longevity of your organization? if our nonprofits can't survive COVID-19, we really need to take a look and see whether our organizations matter. So it's very critical that you as nonprofit leaders, you as donors, you as people who want to see these organizations thrive are doing everything that you can to help out the nonprofit organizations in your community. So specifically, again, for your nonprofit organization, I understand that budgets are tight. I understand that not one person can do everything, but what is your organization doing to segment how you fundraise, right? There are grant opportunities. There are online events that you can do these days. There are people that you're targeting for major gifts specifically. And what is a major gift at your organization, right? At the University of Michigan, a major gift is $100,000 or more. When I was at the Red Cross, a major gift was only $2,500 or more. So it's really dependent on your donor base. And this goes to the fact that you need to have a software that tracks your donors. QuickBooks is great for accounting, but it's not a development software. Excel can only do so much. You need to be able to track and look at when was the last time somebody gave to your organization, how much, and also look at what was their last gift, because if it was 2 years ago and they didn't give this year, you need to be following up with that person with a different strategy than everybody else. So you need to be able to segment your list and focus on those minute details. And when you do that, your strategic planning for your fundraising will be much more successful. And then the annual fund, right? We have Ramadan every year. We have year-end giving every year. You should have a separate strategy for that as well. So within fundraising and development, there needs to be proper stewardship. And what do I mean by that? There needs to be a life cycle of a donation. When somebody gives to your organization online or they send in a check, what are the steps that you take to thank that donor? Yes, there's an automated email online that's generated, but everybody knows that that is automatic, right? What are you as a board member doing to thank that donor? Let's say if the gift is $5,000 or more, a board member should be reaching out to that donor to thank them. If the gift is $500 or more, the executive director should be sending a handwritten thank you note to that donor. There are things that you can do to show your donors that you care, that you've received their gift, and notify them accordingly as well. So also, part of the stewardship plan is how do you show that you've used their donation and that their donation matters to you, right? It could be a separate email where you're not fundraising, but simply saying, hey, thank you so much for your gift earlier this year. Here's what we've been able to do so far with your support. And then line out what exactly your accomplishments have been. And do not say donate in that specific message. It's just to thank them. So we've been talking a little bit about the donor life cycle, right? And a very critical component of that is going to be all of the first-time donors to your organization. So how do you then get them to give a second gift later that year, the following year, however you determine that? Then how do you get them to give year over year? And if you're able to do that, then those donors are more likely in the long run to be able to give you a major gift, or to leave you in their will, or to give the largest gift to your organization that they can, right? A lot of times we ask donors, what are your top 3 charities? And hopefully they'll say yours is one of them, right? And if they don't, you have to work on that and see how you can align your mission and your vision with their charitable giving plans.
Mohi?
Yes.
There's a question on the chat. I'm just going to read it to you. Please highlight tracking tools that you suggest and are favorable. What software are you inclined towards? Many nonprofits, as you mentioned, are using Excel and QuickBooks or Google Sheets. Can you discuss options?
Yeah, that is a good question. So when it comes to donor softwares, there are dozens to choose from. Pick what one works best for your budget. I could list 5 or 6, but again, I don't want to lead you towards ones that may not be a good fit for you. But what I can do is, as a resource, compile a list and share it out. And then you can research them and do their demos and everything like that. Because I personally am familiar with several, but it takes a unique user to learn that database and be efficient in that database. So, however, I will say, like, companies like Salesforce, they do offer free CRMs, client relationship management tools, but then to make them effective, you have to highly customize them. And then the customization costs a lot, and they limit the number of users who can log into that system. So again, just because something's labeled free, it may not be the best solution for you. And what I will say is specifically use a CRM that is made for nonprofit organizations, not something that was made for a business and then is modified for a nonprofit. So I'll leave it there. Reach out to me specifically about this, and I will give you more information in regards to that. I will share my email and everything like that with everybody as well. So back to your donor base and what you can do. So a different way to look at this donor life cycle is through this donor pyramid. How are you going to identify a prospect, right? For those of you in sales, this is similar. This is clear cut how you engage your customer, right? So you take this same approach for your donor base. And when I was talking about board members and their spheres of influence, that should be your prospect list, your identity list, right? Just because somebody doesn't have a kid at your Sunday school doesn't mean they can't be a donor. So you need to expand that mindset of saying, who are people that I know of in my personal network who can still donate to my organization because they care about the mission of the organization. They want to engage the next generation of Muslim leaders, right? When Jahanara met me all those years ago, I was just a teenage kid, right? I had no plan of what I wanted to do, but I had a support system that cultivated me, that stewarded me to become a leader, right? And now I'm leading this organization and doing this work. And it's because of those things in my mosque community, in my halakha group community, in my engagement in my youth group, that I'm so committed to doing this work, right? That's why I'm doing this work today. And you can use those same parallels to say that you are educating the next generation of American Muslims to be strong in their identity with their faith and with their American culture, right? So you need to think more broadly about who your potential donor base is. Then those are your prospects. You engage them as first-time donors, and you invite them, and you inform them, and you build their interest, and you involve them, and you invest time in them, and you inspire them, and that's when they're going to give you more money. If you ask a donor for their advice, they will likely give you advice and money. If you ask a potential donor for money, they'll likely just give you advice, right? So on this bottom threshold of building your donor base, you have to look at what is their link to your organization, what is their ability to give to your organization, and what is their interest in your organization. And if you can engage those things and maybe give it a numeric score of 1 to 5, right? And if somebody's at a 15, you have them in the door. But if somebody's only at a 10 or a 6, you have to work on that linkage, ability, and interest to get them to get motivated to give for that first time. And when you get to them making a major gift or becoming a more frequent donor, that linkage, ability, and interest turns into linkage, involvement, and advocating for you, right? Because once you get them in the door, then they can tell your story for you. And those are the best types of donors and supporters. So I hope that that gives you a little bit of taste of how you can engage your donor base and what you need to do from your current state to shift into the culture of engaging your donors. And what can you do with your marketing, right? What is your social media plan? How are you reaching out to your donors? There's a really cool software called Hootsuite, and you can use this software for free, and you can engage and activate 3 social media plugins, whether that's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever you use to talk about your organization. And you can come up with a planning schedule of setting in your content and scheduling it, and then posting it to those 3 platforms through this one platform, Hootsuite. So it helps you strategically post to all of your social media accounts, and you can schedule those ahead of time as well. So I'm a big fan of Hootsuite. Then, of course, you guys have your email list, which you guys have used. And you need to also look at how often are you actually sending things in the mail, because you may not have emails for everybody. You may not have addresses for everybody. You may not have phone numbers for everybody. So you have to mix your messaging through those platforms as well. In order to create flyers and do different work, there are a lot of free resources that do a good job. The one that I like the most is called Canva. So again, you can build your graphic design and create your flyers and announcements, and it's a really easy tool to have an ability to create these messages for your appeals as well. So use Hootsuite, use Canva. It'll make your life a lot easier when you are working for your organization. So how do you engage your board and volunteers? What specific skill sets do you have that you can offer, and what are you motivated to helping your organization achieve? Can you be on a specific committee and lead that committee effort? How often are the meetings? How efficient are you being with engaging your board members, right? Have a specific task, have a specific timeline, ask them for their attention to it in that time frame, and make it easy for your volunteers to help your organization out. So, again, back to the faith. In the Quran, it said, "Never will you attain the good reward until you spend in the way of God from what you love. And whatever you spend, indeed, God is knowing of it." I don't know about you guys, but especially during this time, having money is such a comforting factor. And also, there's a lot of people that don't have money, and that's causing them stress, right? So if you do have that level of comfort and you are able to help out other people in need, you can do that through your charitable giving as well. And again, it's such a unique time that we're living in today that many people are helping out, and it's so motivating to see all the good that is happening. And even though you may be a school that isn't necessarily helping people out through this pandemic, you are still playing a vital part in the overall society and overall impact. So don't lose sight of your vision, of your mission, and what your organization is doing. One of the things that your nonprofit can do is also set up an endowment. And this is when you have the ability to invest a little bit of money. You can do that and generate a return on that investment and have that for you. Of course, the stock market right now is unpredictable. But when things get better, or when you feel more comfortable to invest, those are conversations that we can have at that time. And I'll skip that, but this is a good example of if you donated $10,000 a year in the year 2000 all the way through 2018, and you invested it in Amana Mutual Funds, Aman X Fund, on an investment of $180,000 through those 18 years, you would have had $537,000 as of 2018, right? So think of that, right? If your nonprofit can afford $10,000 a year to invest, it makes it worth it.
Yes,
So, we will
Please mute
also,
yourself. Somebody. Hello.
not to deal with that. But you can mute them actually yourself.
Jihan, maybe you can mute them.
Yeah.
Through.
So to close things up, and we'll open it up to Q&A, again, in order to seek sustenance, you can do it through your charitable giving. So I will let you guys ask questions at this point. Thank you so much for listening and joining in. Hopefully you learned a little bit about how your organization can make an impact, and we can talk specifically about what you can do at this point. So if there are questions, dump them into the chat box, and you can also unmute yourself and talk as well. So let's have a good conversation over the next 25 minutes or so.
Mohi, I have a question.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. The question, how can your organization be used as a channel by people who want to donate to Cordoba's school or for their activities?
Yeah. So
what are the exact services do you provide?
yeah, that's a great question. So we offer what's called a donor advised fund. And again, that's an opportunity for a family like yours to put in all of your charitable giving dollars into a savings account that AMCF manages. When you put in your money to that account, you immediately get a tax deduction, and we give you a receipt for that amount of money. So it's as if you've already given it to charity. But what this savings account, this donor advised fund does is allows you to then plan all of your charitable giving going forward. So let's say you itemize and you give more than $25,000 a year, or even if you don't, this donor advised fund allows you to get one tax receipt for all of your charitable giving, and then it allows you to distribute it to all of the nonprofits that you want. So specifically like the Sunday School or any nonprofit organization that you want to support, you can do it through a donor advised fund, and that's the specific service that AMCF offers to families.
And that list of organizations could include my university, for example. It doesn't have to be, right?
Yep, any nonprofit organization, as long as they're not a hate group, we'll fund it.
Other questions?
Mohit, this is Malik. Thank you for the comprehensive presentation. I wanted to ask you two questions. One is, what are some of the common mistakes that you see, freshly started nonprofits make? Common pitfalls, common mistakes that they make that causes them to flame out and the organization just dissipates.
Yeah.
And the second question is,
can we do one at a time, just so that I can?
Oh yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah. Sorry.
No problem. I just want to make sure that I give you the best answer that I can. So I think a lot of nonprofit organizations struggle in the beginning without proper planning. So that's why I started with a strategic plan, a marketing plan, and a development plan. If a nonprofit starts there, they'll have more success down the line, because what that's going to do is showcase all of your ideas and how you're going to accomplish them and it puts a specific person in charge of those activities. So again, the best thing a nonprofit that's just starting out can do is commit to developing their strategic plan, their marketing plan, and their development plan. What's your next question?
Sure. And I think the next question is the actual act of fundraising itself. And for any organization, be it public sector, private sector, nonprofit, bringing dollars in through the door is probably the hardest function of any organization. And we are emotional beings. We're not necessarily so rational, and just the idea of making an ask is, can be uncomfortable, can seem daunting, can seem difficult. Of course, there are people who are complete naturals at it, but I think for the average individual, it's not so straightforward. So I thought to ask you, what are some of the things that you advise on to new nonprofits in terms of getting over the discomforts of asking people for money?
Yeah, of course. So when I referred to every board member has to be involved in fundraising, it specifically doesn't have to be making the ask, right? That's where people get uncomfortable, is making the ask. But everybody should be involved in the process, in the sense that they should open up their network. They should help with creating the appeal. They should be involved in saying and identifying, this person just had a company that went public and they might be able to help us out in a significant way, or this, that, the other, brainstorming, being on that committee, right? So there are multiple ways in which everybody can participate without directly having to make the ask. But specifically about making the ask, remember that it's not about you, it's about the organization, right? So that helps me when I'm doing all of this, because, I know that people are just going to think like, oh, here's Muhi again asking for money, right? Or here's so-and-so asking for money. But the idea behind it should always be connected to what is the mission and vision and goal of that organization you're fundraising for, because that's the world we want to live in. You want to inspire people to give, right? So we need to talk about how we market that ask. I see Sayeda has her hand up in the program.
Salams Muhi, and salams Naz and everyone at Cordoba. Muhi, this was awesome, very systematic and helpful and methodical, and I appreciate it very much. As your peer, I'm curious to know, what trends are you seeing in terms of specific grant-making areas? What are you seeing specifically in terms of interests across the Muslim philanthropic community? Any specific sectors are you seeing an inclination towards, hypothetically, civic engagement initiatives versus leadership initiatives? Is there any concentration that is more buzzing, given the landscape in in such an intimate way?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and thank you so much for joining, and really appreciate our bi-weekly calls and just brainstorming in this industry. I think that we're seeing a lot of people interested, obviously now with the COVID-19 response and organizations doing so much involved with that. But I genuinely believe that those donors who've been donating to you for a long time are still going to commit to your organization. So you at least have to present the opportunity to ask them. You have to present the opportunity that you're in need. You have to present the opportunity to showcase how your gift is going to make an impact and difference to all the people that you're serving. So I think that a lot of people have been shifting some resources to obviously the mosques that have had to close, that aren't making their Friday collections, that aren't going to be having people filling their rooms in Ramadan, right? So that I've seen as a general trend in the last few months. I think that organizations that typically receive more funding, like civic engagement organizations, or you know, maybe some of the other international relief agencies, like they're still the international relief agencies are still doing COVID-19 response work in addition to their general food distribution programs or things that they're doing. So I think the industry will show that they'll still receive their funding. But I've been giving a lot of thought to this, and you know, I'm still curious to see how it will all play out. But I think the most important thing that we can do is go back to that strategy. Go back to why you got into this. Go back to the basics of why you started. What was the need at the core of it when you started your organization? And come up with that purpose and put that into your appeal. So I hope that helps answer your question. Mesa, I see that you also have a question.
Hi, yes. Thank you very much. That was really inspirational. I'm calling from London, but a lot of 90% of what you were talking about is very relevant here. So my question is about how you pivot when things have changed. So I work with a lot of, I work with a huge team of volunteers, but it was all to do with live events. So we had like conscious poets, and we promoted like, you know, artists who had kind of more spiritual meaning behind the words that they performed. And then we sort of graduated into music. And so at the moment, like I'm trying to support the musicians in the sense that, you know, we're still having conversations about your role as a musician and uplifting people as opposed to de-inspiring them or whatever. But they're all sort of up and coming artists. So none of them are in a situation where, you know, I can lean on Spotify or someone to support them. So I feel really like there's a responsibility to make sure that they don't starve or drop music or worse. A lot of them are very down. But at the same time, I can't really ask my supporters to continue to support live music because there isn't any live music. It's not really live, it's online. So when you sort of try and pivot and you ask supporters to continue to fund you, but there's no show for them really, what do you do?
Yeah, you know, that's a really specific scenario. And what I'll say is like, this will still benefit the artist themselves, right? And that's the reason why people go to shows, they love the experience, they have all of that motivating them when they buy a ticket, right? And online experience is definitely going to be different, but at the core of it, you need to come up with messaging that shows how these artists are now suffering because they don't have public shows to benefit from, and B, how you are providing an alternative that will still get funding or help to these artists by this means. So somehow massaging that to make it more impactful, but I would start there.
Yeah.
And I want to get to the next question as well. And
Thank you.
I see, Imral, you had a question about what motivates donors. So I'm sharing my screen again from the presentation. This is research based on the American community of what motivates donors. So we went through this again. It was the mission, desire to make a difference, and all of that. And then I'll refer back to ISPU having their research on Muslim philanthropy in the United States. So these are two great resources, and I just shared the link for the presentation. So definitely check out the Muslim philanthropy report and the presentation as well for you to get a better sense of that too. Cool. So I know in terms of time, we said that we'd wrap up in about 10 minutes.
Question.
Yes, please ask.
I had a quick question on endowment. What is the typical advice in terms of an organization getting, say, funds and allocating between an endowment or just the operating budget?
Yeah. So when you come up with your plan, for your development plan, you have to come up with your strategies, right? An endowment is hopefully helping your organization long-term receive a lot of assets or funding that will then produce a return on that investment for your operations, right? So people and universities do a great example of this, right? There's endowed professorships, right? So for a specific department, for a specific professor, they make these endowed professorships where they raise $1 million, and then from that $1 million comes the salary of the person and all of these things for the department and everything like that. So similarly, you have to plan out what your endowment purpose is and what that target number is and how that funding will then provide resources. And in the industry, we call this a capital campaign. So I talked about annual fund, I talked about major gifts, and in the industry, they call this a capital campaign. So when you do a capital campaign, it's very specific for the need. Some universities will do a capital campaign to come up with a building or to renovate the dorms or do a specific project. And a capital campaign usually lasts 5 to 7 years. And when you're planning that, the first 1 to 3 years is a private phase. You're not publicizing it, but you're coming up with a strategy of what the purpose of that endowment is. And then you invite your top donors at the top of the pyramid. You invite those people first, because when you come up with an endowment strategy, it has to come in with at least 2 donations that make up 10% of your goal. So I could talk about endowment strategy and all of this stuff in extent, and I will likely do another presentation just on that. And you know, there's a lot of resources online, but again, you have to come up with what your goal for the endowment is financially and how and what it will support.
Mohi, it's Jahan, so I have a question. If there was one lesson that we could, as the Cordoba House Sunday School, take away from today to raise some funds for the Sunday school, what would it be?
Yeah.
Like, what is the easiest, like giving? Yeah.
Yeah, so you know, there's crowdfunding platforms like LaunchGood that you can create a campaign pretty easily before Ramadan, and that might be a good way for you to come up with, again, the content of what you put in that crowdfunding campaign has to be specific to your vision, what you're going to accomplish. So those are the things in the background that your team needs to come up with, your pitch, and you can create a video, you can create verbiage, you can create text messages that you forward in WhatsApp. You need to get creative, right? And I would say that, again, come up with your messaging, stick to the basics, come up with a goal, immediate goal for Ramadan, what you're trying to achieve. Maybe that's 40,000, maybe it's 100,000, but have a specific goal and say that, and try to do a mailing appeal, right? Like if you have addresses for people, don't count that out. So again, you have to, in order to get more people into your base, you have to do as many things as possible to get that. And it might start out with a $10, $100, a $500 donation from somebody, but at least you get them in the door. And then you can work on that in year 2 of how to build them up the pyramid as well.
Thank you.
And honestly, like I can talk about this stuff all day. This is what I nerd out about. So reach out to me if you have specific questions. I'll do my best to fit you in before Ramadan, but even like long-term, right? After Ramadan, things like that, let's engage one another. I'm here as a resource to you. American Muslim Community Foundation is here as a resource to you as a family, to you as a nonprofit organization. We are so honored to be doing this work and having partners like Naz. Again, so thankful to you for everything that you're doing and pushing the needle, this conversation, right? Across the country, we need to be thinking about Muslim charitable giving, the impact that we are having on society overall. And I want to be able to say that one day AMCF is working with hundreds of thousands of American Muslim families, and we're tracking the impact that we have and working with families like yours to do exactly that.
Inshallah, Muhi, thank you so much. I feel that it's not been an easy ride raising funds for particularly a Quran program in the city, and for a program that's geared just towards Muslim kids. I mean, you can't really make a very broad appeal for that, except from the parents. But I think that your talk was very helpful in suggesting how we can reach out to various networks who are cause-driven and increase our pool of giving. And also, I think that programs and initiatives like yours, Muhi, is fundamental to the education of Muslim families like myself in general, and how we can, just by uniting and by showing up to presentations like this, inform ourselves and strengthen ourselves. So I really thank you for making this effort. Were there any other questions from anybody else? Okay, so I wanted to thank you, Jahan, for inviting Muhi, and Mansoor, you as well. Muhi, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. If you want to reach out to Muhi privately, he's put his email down on the side on the chat. I believe it's Muhi, M-U-H-I, at Muhi, I'm sorry, it's MUHI at amuslimcf.org, correct, Muhi?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone. Inshallah.
And movies, sorry, this is Asim Rahman. Just one last thing. Thank you for the presentation. I think you mentioned somewhere through that you might be able to provide a copy of the slide deck. That would be great, because there are a lot of good information in there that it would be helpful to refer back to at a later point. But thanks for all that you're doing. This is really great work.
Yeah, definitely. I'll provide that link in the chat again and email everyone if that's okay. And we want to make this as a resource that is available to everyone. And we are recording this session, so it'll go up on YouTube as well. Hopefully that's okay with everyone. We forgot to mention that in the beginning. But yeah.
Thank you.
Inshallah.
All right.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Early